Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a bit of live gameplay, which is something I've not done for a while I think. This time I am going to jump into some sub games. I have been playing some subs just to see if I could get some kind of exceptional replay, but I haven't really, and I don't think I've played them enough to be anywhere close to actually being good at them, so definitely temper your expectations there. However, we have just had, with the patch gone, a fairly substantial change. Although not that big, to be honest. They tried to tackle the issue, the unbalanced nature of homing torps, by adding a new torp type. So you still have your homing torps, and your homing torps are now weaker in terms of the damage they do, but the same double ping mechanic still is in place. And then now we have also just dumbfire torps, I guess we could call them, which are putting you in the category of an inefficient destroyer, because they don't have any sort of homing capability, but they do hit harder, and you can still use the ping with them, but if you manage to ping the same section of a ship twice, they will do even more damage. But that part, of course, is a bit tricky, and frankly I've not really had much success with those. I think you'd have to be pretty close range, because although they are very fast, you're not firing all that many of them at once. Subs, as I've said in the past, are basically a complete parody of what they are in real life. I mean, this is an arcade game, but of all the classes we have in the game, these are by far the most arcadey. They are utterly ahistorically fast. The torpedoes are utterly, completely ahistorically fast, and of course the whole thing of guiding the torpedoes with your sub pings just doesn't make any sense in terms of anything that real life World War II subs could do. Acoustic homing torpedoes were, I think late in the war, I want to say. But yeah, the kind of torps we have, they're practically the more modern kind of wire-guided ones. In terms of, well, not quite, but you know, designating a target and then having the torps home in on that target. You know, that's well beyond anything a World War II sub could do. Anyway, I'll be playing the tier 8 subs for this. I'll probably do one in each of these, and we'll see how it goes. Now, as with some of the sneakier destroyers, whether or not there is a carrier in play has a fairly dramatic impact. Of course, you can dive underneath the water, and there is a limited dive time, which you can refresh by resurfacing. But yeah, it does take a while to refresh that, so you kind of want to stay on the surface as much as you can help it, at least to start with. These subs are, I mean, even with the changes that they've made, and we've talked about this in the podcast, and oh, this is this is co-op. Okay, I didn't mean to take this into co-op. We'll fast forward past this bit, but what was I going to say? Yeah, I still think they do not fit the game. I still think that they are a really poor bit of parasitic game design that just fundamentally will never mesh well with the other classes and the other gameplay that we have. Anyway, you don't want to watch me play some co-op, so yeah, we'll fast forward past this bit. Right, there we go. We have the proper battle mode selected this time. Right, so I know I have to kind of remember what I was talking about. Probably something about them being a poor fit for the game. And, well, we've kind of been over this in the podcast a bunch, and I've talked about this in, I think, previous videos as well, but essentially, as such a late addition to the game, and the fact that the rest of the game was designed around the original 4 classes, with no intention of subs being added, and subs having been added purely as more content, essentially, and we can already see that in that we have the first premium sub upcoming, which is unsurprisingly perhaps going to be a Soviet sub, even while the subs themselves are still undergoing semi-major changes. That's a very questionable decision in my view. That's like selling, premium stuff for an early access game, which some games do. It's an early access class, and yet they're planning to sell premium subs already in the near future. So I think wargaming, the fact that they, even though they have said if it's a poor fit for the game, we will not have them in the game, I don't think I ever truly believed that, and I believe it less and less as time goes on, because they have just, committed so much time and expense into it at this point that even if it is just a horrendously bad idea, that they're going to do it anyway, and I suspect it's going to absolutely be continually tweaked and changed over the coming however long, just because it's not going to fit well. And one of the big issues is, especially with the homing torps, you can either make subs be effective, in which case they have the tools to be too effective, potentially, especially in the hands of a skilled player, or you neuter their effectiveness, in which case nobody wants to play them. And so it becomes a class where it's almost impossible, if not outright impossible, to find that middle line where they are actually good for the game, they enhance gameplay, they're fun to play and fun to play against. And subs as they are now, subs in pretty much every iteration we've had, apart from in operations, the one operation we've had, the very first introduction of subs, that's where they were fun to play. And then in any kind of especially co-op mode, it's just over too fast to be able to do much effectively in subs. But in any player versus player mode, they just do not fit well at all. I mean, this is a game with 2 subs in it, bunch of destroyers, and it's it's plenty of battleships for me to target, but it's not so fun for being the only cruisers. And honestly, I think cruisers as a class, this is not an uncommon kind of lineup, but they're almost being more squeezed out by the nature of the matchmaking now, with these new subs taking up spots. Is that there's a Balau. Cruisers are even more squeezed than they were before, I think, in terms of not only people wanting to play them, but then people putting or them being put into games, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling thing, because you end up with matchmaking like this, and you're even less likely to want to play a cruiser in future. But that's a kind of additional side effect, as it were. Let's switch over to the homing torps. Now, we do have this enemy Balau on our Hydro, which is about to go down, but there we go. Let's get them on the ping, and they've just charged right in. There's certainly plenty of not good playing sub players at the moment, or just that alone is people are still figuring this out, and okay, fine, but I mean, this is just me spotting for my allies. I don't think we're going to find more torps here. That's definitely going to skew whatever wargaming might have useful data they might get, because they're really they're a class where potentially you could be quite powerful, but at the same time you've got plenty of players playing like this, and I don't think that's done anything useful. But they're just suicidally charging in, and it's not doing anything useful for anybody. Now, this is me also, of course, being spotted for the enemies. This is by far the best way to try and tackle enemy subs when you're in a sub, is hope that they're close enough, stupidly, to your allies that they absolutely just get completely ganked by them. But of course, that's gotten me spotted and dropped at the same time, which is not so fun. I've lost almost half my health already, and I'm flooding, so that's not so nice. Oh, right, they're actually a little close, that monarch, but we have our stern tubes in play potentially. So let's bring up our torps, might as well dump them all out. Oh, never mind, they're dead. Okay, well they were the closest thing. There's also Tashkent there. I mean, our torps are reloading pretty damn quickly. I mean, this is a major disadvantage for any destroyer that doesn't have, you know, this is one of the other ways in which they are a poor fit. It places that extra burden on destroyers in order to actually, you know, deal with submarines, and they can end up in a really bad position doing that. So yeah, it's put that extra burden on destroyers. It's also, of course, put the extra burden on everybody's damage control party, especially battleships. And you can potentially, you know, pinging is free, it only costs you time. You can just ping somebody over and over and hope that they waste their damage control. Oh, are we going to get below these in time? Yes. I actually could have used my enhanced... I think that affects your diving speed. Yeah, it does. Got to remember that's a thing. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing I found. You can potentially just do that, especially with the Soviet and the New German BCs that have a limited number of damage control parties. Potentially, you can, like, hopefully stress them enough that they might waste one of those charges. Although with the German battle cruisers, of course, they have the additional security blanket of a hydro. So that is going to help them out a bit, because you don't necessarily, you know you're going to have that extra warning. Right, anyway, we need to resurface. My oxygen's almost done, at which point you get forced to resurface anyway. I almost wish there was a consumable you could tag that would increase your oxygen refresh, but maybe they're saving that for the Soviet subs. I don't know. That's one of the things that particularly boggles me about the fact they're going to introduce a premium sub so soon, is that, well, it's unlikely that that's going to see any substantial changes, so it might end up being horribly overpowered or horribly underpowered, and at which point Wargaming will do what they usually do and just take it off sale. I mean, if it's horribly underpowered, they might buff it, but if it's horribly overpowered, yeah, it'll just get taken off sale, and it'll still be in the game, and still problematic, and there won't really be anything anyone can do about it, except, you know, be aware that it's horribly overpowered if it does happen to be in the same game as them. This enemy team seems to have just kind of collapsed. I haven't really done anything. Oh, there's the enemy gearing. And let's actually trigger that. Let's get down quicker. And see if we can actually trigger the hydro, so we get at least the minimap marker to know where this gearing is. Dead ahead. Does smoke negate hydro? Because that would be pretty dumb if so. That would make not a lot of sense. It's been spotted. At least ping in with the actually, let's switch torp types for a destroyer. Now, it'd be nice if it was a little more prominent when like, if you're keeping eyes on it, you can see if the white thing disappears, obviously, but if somebody negates the ping, it picks up it comes up as a thing there, but you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to see that. Anyway, let's see if this does the business. If it does, then... oh, they've negated it. Or I think actually they're on the final homing at that point anyway, but we got some hits, so that was... well, one hit, that was not terrible. Right, we're going to have to come up very soon. I mean, the utility of subs can often be quite limited. And, oh, we actually have a flooding on that... let's hope we can back up and stay outside of... no, we are being not hydroed. We are being... yeah, I'm probably just going to die here. Not a lot I can do, just because my... you know, everything ran out, so... let's well pump out the torps, and I sank. Maybe I will get one into that now. He's backing up. Never mind. We've won this anyway, but I've made a fairly minimal contribution. And it really is like there's that saying with torpedo destroyers where it can be absolutely feast or famine, and I think that doubly so goes for the subs, because you can end up doing absolutely nothing. You can sail around and contribute an absolute minimal amount. And you can have spent an entire 20 minutes sailing around, ducking and dodging, firing off torpedoes, and just nothing happens. But equally, you can get yourself into situations where it ends up being blatantly unfair for whoever it is you're fighting against. So they are the most unbalanced class in the game in that particular regard as a player experience. And of course, if you're playing against them, they can be supremely frustrating, especially if they're just pinging you over and over, because there ends up being that psychological warfare element almost. You don't know if there's torpedoes in the water or not. They can just ping you over and over, and you know they're out there somewhere. But are they firing torpedoes at you? Are they just faking out? Are they trying to lull you into thinking that they're faking you out and actually there are torpedoes in the water? There's no good tools that you can give a player in that situation that doesn't then completely negate anything that any chance the sub player would have of doing something to you, because at that point it's just like complete guesswork for the person who's on the receiving end of those pings. And it's only if you have hydro that you have any semblance of knowing, you know, what might happen. And it almost makes me wish there was something along the lines of the radio location skill, and that if you could take that it would at least give you, you know, a quadrant in which pings are coming from, for example. And that wouldn't necessarily be a completely unbalanced thing from the sub player's point of view, because it's still a fairly wide area, and you know, if it's only while you're actively pinging away, then you have the option and ability to stop pinging and actually get out of there potentially. But that's still all, you know, as a suggestion, that's still like a sticking plaster over the fact that submarines fundamentally as a class do not really fit in with the rest of the game at all. They just don't. Anyway, this Des Moines, I think, they're making a valiant last effort and farming some reset points, maybe getting some last kills, but yeah, we dominated this game. And although they have killed half our team in the process, it kind of wasn't in any doubt. I don't think I really contributed much there, though. I was able to spot that enemy sub, but that enemy sub was just YOLOing into half of our team on that flank, and yeah, you know, it's not like I was being completely inactive there, but I didn't get much for my trouble. So as a player, that wasn't particularly fun as an experience, particularly with the limited amount of dive time I had and the time it takes to refresh the dive time. But of course, if you give people unlimited dive time, that's even worse. So there's no way, like, just the fundamental ability to disappear beneath the waves. You know, you either make it ineffective against other players kind of like all the time or some of the time, because otherwise it's too effective and that's a problem. And you know, then you end up with the subs themselves being kind of weak. And how do you counterbalance that? I mean, make the torps even more powerful, but then in order for the torps to actually do something, you know, you have to use the homing mechanic. But then if you do that, the subs become too powerful. So you just end up kind of going round in circles, really, about how balanced or unbalanced, or, well, not even how balanced or unbalanced, but exactly how unbalanced. Unbalanced in which directions? You know, surface versus subsurface. And just, I mean, even this is just leaving aside the vastly different role that subs played in real life. There were attempts to implement a fleet submarine doctrine, but they were largely unsuccessful because subs just couldn't keep up with surface ships. And they've sort of circumvented that by making subs ridiculously fast in-game, to the point where we're sort of matching and only being exceeded by post-war, Cold War nuclear submarines. There are subs in the game that are actually faster than some Cold War nuclear submarines. It's actually a little bit ridiculous. More than a little bit ridiculous. So it sort of... I was joking on... I can't even remember when, some previous podcast, but, that they'll make the tier 10 Soviet submarine, whenever that comes in, they'll just straight up make it the Alpha class sub, which could do like 45 knots when submerged, which was the fastest attack submarine that's ever been produced by any navy or any nation. Another standard game, by the way, which is a bit kind of bleh. I mean, we could run for the carrier. I have seen people do that, where they just try and make a dash for the carrier underwater as quickly as they can. But, I mean, I have seen that be successful, but then you're stuck with potentially enemy destroyers running you down, although in this case we have a lot of battleships, 1, 2, 3 cruisers and only 1 destroyer. So this time it's the destroyers that have gotten squashed, and again we have double subs. Although this time the subs are in a division, and sometimes I would particularly go and try and counter enemy submarines, but given their subs are in a division, I don't want to do that because it'd be facing 2-on-1. So you end up having that calculus into things as well. So because you can div up in subs like that, it makes that I can't go and try and counter those submarines, because unless they are dashing into a concentration of allies, and therefore will have a whole bunch of airdropped weaponry available to go after them, a whole bunch of airdropped depth charges, it would just be a really, really bad idea. So yeah, instead I don't know, maybe I should just go after their carrier. Maybe I could try that. It looks like they've spread out on the flanks and they only have the 1 destroyer to worry about. Both their subs, we know where they are, so I guess what else is there that I can really do? I mean, if I take out their carrier, and I can then play around with this flank and not have to worry about their carrier. So yes, I suppose. I'm going to have to be submerged while I traverse the camp, though. One thing to note with carriers is that I don't believe there is a single sub in the game that has functioning AA, even though lots of them have their AA guns modelled. And although, it would be a pretty low AA value, it would be better than a 0 AA value, so you could at least take down fighters that have been stationed in place above you. Weirdly, some of them do have their modelled secondary guns, or their deck guns, functional as secondary guns, though, and they will, if you're within very close range, they'll fire their 76 or their 88mm projectile or whatever. But yeah, those are actually a gimmick at that point. They're not going to be helpful in any way unless you get incredibly lucky. Anyway, there's the Furious, who hopefully will think it's the destroyer that's going for them, because our destroyer is going for them. We could even just fire torpedoes at this stage, actually. We'll do our dumb fire torps because they do more damage, and even though it's a fair distance away, they have a long range, these torps, and they are super duper fast, like ludicrously fast as torpedoes. Now we could potentially also put out homed torpedoes against that Heinrich back there, because the ping isn't going to interfere with my dumbfire torps that I've put out. So let's put out the torps, and actually we don't want to slow down here really and run out of oxygen while we're in the cap. Now, trying to ping the same place over and over is pretty tricky, especially when someone's turning like this. So, you know, countering the pings it's not like it's impossible by any stretch of the imagination. So, oh, that's actually tagged on. No, they went past, never mind. Got 2 hits into the Furious, though. At this point, we might as well tag on to the Furious, and our front tubes will be reloaded very soon. And we'll try this. Although, trying to tag an aircraft carrier with your pings to get even more than momentary guidance is, yeah, it's kind of ironic that, you know, it's the what that Gordon Ramsay meme about oh precious, oh darling, or whatever it is, that even CVs, you know, get the most protection against guided torpedoes in this game by far, without any kind of measure of an anything, because the pings just get negated by the super quick damage control cooldown. So yeah, you actually have to end up using your dumbfire torps, and those are more easily avoidable. In fact, let's not even bother trying to turn for the rear torps. It's going to take long enough that we might as well stick with going forwards and use the 4 front tubes. One of the peculiarities, of course, with subs is that your tubes are mounted front and rear, and that actually greatly impacts your manoeuvring. In fact, the tier 10 German sub only has front tubes entirely, so you can never drop on somebody that's coming up behind you. But yeah, unlike destroyers where you have to turn and give some kind of broadside to manage to get your torps off, you know, that actually helps with you can be turning and turning away, whereas with subs you have to be going actively towards the target, or at very least holding stationary from a target and hoping that yeah. Now I can't even get the benefit of the extra damage from pings because it's a carrier, so yeah, carrier's truly the blessed class in this game, because, you know, if they were going to get everything else they get, they might as well get extra protection against submarines as well, right? Sure. Anyway, the planes can't actually hurt me, I don't think, so we need to just wait for them to go away, and then I think we start capping, because yay, standard games! Standard games are so much fun. Standard games with subs that can just sneak through the middle, even more fun. Yeah, I don't know. Right, yes, the Hatsu is smoking up, so you know what, let's go sit in the Hatsu smoke and I can actually surface, and in fact we can surface right now, I think. That's the wrong way. We can just make use of the smoke, because those planes are going for the Ismail instead. And now it's a question of whether the enemy subs can dash back in time. And isn't this fun? I'm having so much fun, and I'm sure the enemy players are having so much fun. Just what absolute failure this has been. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of that kind of, as I've said, parasitic game design, that late game edition, or even, you know, midlife game edition that doesn't serve any purpose other than to provide more content and more ways of selling things to the players. And honestly, I mean, this kind of leads me to other thoughts I've had about the game generally, in that we've probably passed the point where there are the perfect number of ships in the game, in terms of a player being able to go through and collect them all. It's sort of the curse of this being an online free-to-play game. They have to keep adding stuff in order for the game to live. And so you end up going past the point where there's the optimal number of ships. And then, especially with the nature of this game, this is true for World of Tanks and War Thunder and any such game where they're basing it off real life stuff, you have to start going into the more esoteric projects and the made up, you know, semi-napkin design projects, and yeah, it starts to kind of tail off and become more and more fantasy-based, almost, shall we say. And with World of Tanks, I mean, we have very occasional new lines based on you know, blueprints and proposals and whatever. Some of them a lot more far-fetched than others, such as the Chinese tank destroyer line, for example. And I think we're starting to hit that stage with World of Warships. We've had the Spanish nation announced, and I think with a stretch, with plenty of paper designs, you could probably get battleships, cruisers and destroyers out of that. Almost certainly you can get, say, Italian and Russian submarines, French subs, but we're starting to hit the point where we're getting into, you know, the project proposal stage, and we've got a lot of those in with the Soviet ships already, but we're going to get a lot more of that for other navies. In fact, we've already started to get that with other navies, ships like the Kearsarge, for example. So yeah, you can almost see submarines as part of that general trend of, well, we need more stuff to add, what can we add, and what other classes are there that they could add in this game, other than, you know, the very small ships that War Thunder has, for example. I mean, that's it really. I mean, there's the other niche things like coastal monitors with their very big guns. But aside from that, there's only so many different sort of classes and designs of warships out there. So I think subs are a general symptom of that, and the fact that they don't really fit the game, I think we're beyond the point where that's going to have stopped wargaming. And in fact, you know, I think that's the reason why they didn't have them early on, is they knew they weren't going to fit the game, but they've come to a stage where they just need more content. And so let's add submarines, even though they aren't good for the game. Anyway, that's just my thoughts, really. Another win, actually less XP this time, even though I managed to do more damage, I think. Who knows? I mean, the fact that we capped that one out certainly would have hurt the overall XP that everyone would have gotten. But standard games are fun, and standard games with submarines are fun, and submarines are also just so much fun. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I've cut back on my warships content a bit anyway, and stuff like submarines is certainly not helping my enthusiasm. It really isn't. I mean, there have been some other good moves by Wargaming in terms of transparency and communication with the community and such like, but subs ain't going away anytime soon. So yeah, I continue to have mixed feelings, very mixed feelings. Anyway, let me know your opinions about subs below. I'm sure you will have some. Maybe just one or two. Otherwise, you can do all the other usual things down underneath the video. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.